Okay, thank you. How many of you? 2, 4, 6, 9, 15. 15 out of 20. Okay lah. Okay, I think I don't remember who asked. Next class, which is on Wednesday, we're going to have midterm. But this time around, I'm not going to do like what I usually do. What I usually did was to have an online test, which you can answer anywhere. But I realized that it does not give you a proper experience of final exam. uh, have you heard the news about your final exam? Last 2 weeks, we had an audit by MQA, but not for undergraduate program. It's for master program, which is for Master of Developmental Psychology. And then during the audit, the auditor raised a question. Why would we pass the subject although the students fail final exam? Okay, things like this. In the MQA guideline 02 for psychology program standard version 2, those who pass the subject, say for example, you got 60 out of 60 your carry mark, and then you only got 10 out of 40 your final exam, you considered fail. Okay, so we have not used that system before. I've used it during my time, but not for human science subject, for RK subject. For RK subject, previously, our carry mark only 40, our final exam is 60. So we need to at least got 30 in order for us to pass the subject. So what I understood right now, only for engineering, remember the other one, that still practice the same style, the same way, which is whatever carry mark you have, you still need to get 50% out of final exam. Then you can pass the subject. Okay. Our experience as instructor, after we move away from exam focus, which is our final exam 60 marks, to assignment focus or coursework focus, which you have carry mark out of 60, students hardly pass their final exam. Okay, we are expecting the score of students between 15 to 22 or 23 out of 40. Okay, and one of comments that we got from students is they basically are not familiar with the way we ask in the final exam. One, the question is different, okay, because we do not ask directly what is norm, what are the types of norms, what are reliability. We ask a very applied case. They give you a scenario and we ask you to solve the problem. So one, with the comments that we received, one, they are not familiar with this style of assessment. Second, even in class, we do not teach case. We teach content. And then it's very few we explain about the case. The students do not have a proper exposure on how to answer the final exam. So I hope this time around, I'm going to do like final exam, although it's in here, but it's a paper-based final exam, and you only got 1.5 hours. Okay, remember your final exam is 2 hours, but you have to answer 4 questions. But this time you only need to answer 2 questions. Okay, just to give you an exposure. Don't worry if you cannot perform, because I am not an exam-oriented base. If you cannot perform, meaning that most of you fail, I will give you a second test. Okay, I will give you a second test. But doesn't mean that first or second test is easy. I got the comments from reviewer. My question is the hardest. Okay, even before I work here, I showed to my master students my final exam question when I was teaching in UTM. And this master student said, oh, nasib baik dia tak belajar dekat UTM. Okay, they are lucky they are not taking psychology in UTM because my question is difficult, even in UTM. Why is difficult? Because the question coming from the example. So when I teach, I give you a lot of examples. But these examples will be used as case in your final exam. So you need to pay attention. Okay. Unfortunately, one of our classmates today, she had an accident. So she will not be able to attend our class. So I did not plan to do hybrid class for today. But since one of you have got a very legit medical excuse, so I still conduct a hybrid class. But I will not encourage you in the future, although I have the capacity or I am able to do hybrid class, for you not to attend class. Because remember, most of the case in the final exam come from example. These examples are not in your textbook. Okay? Okay, let's continue. Okay, for this class, I plan to complete discussing about, wah, gemuknya. Duduk sana. Okay. I plan to complete discussing about norms. Okay. So last class we complete discuss about types of norms. Okay, a little bit. Alamak, tak jalan pula. Okay, a little bit review. Like I mentioned in the last class, when you read your textbook will not explain how many methods or ways or approach for us to understand or interpret test score. Okay, they just mention what are the characteristics of good tests, have a proper guidelines, have a proper administration guidelines, and have norms. The norm is a way for us, test user or test administrator, to understand the score. Beside norms, there are two other ways explained in your textbook, but they don't explain it in this way. There are three ways to interpret score. No, they just explain norms and then they compare norms with fixed reference group scoring and they compare norms with criterion reference evaluation. So that's why if you remember in the first class, we do the exercise, how you take notes. Because in your textbook, they always like to have this maksud tersirat, the hidden meaning. Okay, so indirectly they are saying there are three ways for us to understand test score. One is through norms, what we've learned in last class. Second, fixed reference group scoring. And third, criterion comparison, criterion reference evaluation. Okay, let's look at first fixed reference group scoring. Okay, in the last class, when we talk about norms, norms provide a context for sorry, ada orang baru nak masuk kelas. I don't have this issue before because previously I subscribed Zoom Professional, an individual account. So whenever you have the link, you can join anytime. But now I subscribe under IIM account. So it's a workplace account. So they have some security measures. So whoever wants to join, I have to accept. Then they can join. So that's why I have to move around. Okay, coming back. Norms provide a context for interpreting meaning of a test score. Another type of aid or ways for us to interpret the meaning of the score is the use of fixed reference group scoring system. Okay, norms, we collect data to a lot of groups, and we use the distributions to understand what is or what are the status of our participants' score. Okay, whether their score is low, moderate, high, so it's based on the performance of those groups. But for fixed reference group scoring system, we also collect data. The distribution of scores obtained on the test from one group of test takers, referred to as the fixed reference group, is used as the basis for the calculation of test score for future administration of the test. This morning I have class with master students. So we learn about performance appraisal. Okay, so I told them the easiest way to give reward, okay, awards and rewards for employees, instead of you evaluate them on a certain assessment criteria or procedure, you can just use comparison. Example, this is what I always do when I mark your essay. Previously, I was quite confused why my classmates don't want to be the first one and don't want to be the last one. If I ask anyone want to volunteer, who want to submit first, nobody will volunteer. But during my time, I don't care because I don't want to be in those pressure cooker environment. Do long day exam to pressure, but you like to be in there for so long time. I only sit for half an hour, 1 hour, and then I will go. I will not stay longer. I don't encourage you to do the same lah. Okay. So coming back. Say for example, I give you an essay question, and then I mark the first person. The first person, the first answer script is usually the benchmark. Why? This is the basis of comparison of the following script. Okay, say for example, the first script is mine. So out of 10, I score 7 out of 10. So this is, remember, I don't use any marking schemes. I don't use any proper table to interpret. So I just use this first person as the benchmark. So the second script, when I mark, I will compare the second script with the first script. Is better or is worse? So if it's better than the first script, I will give it 8 out of 10. So if it is worse than it, how worse is worse? If it's too bad, and then maybe I will give 3 or 4. If just it's worse but not so bad, maybe I will give 5 or 6, 5 of 10. But the point here, the first person is the benchmark. That's why previously I don't understand why students don't want to be the first, because they don't want to be the benchmark. Why? Usually the benchmark is not going to get the full mark. So that's why people don't want, which I don't understand before. Maybe I don't care about that as well. So I don't understand, so I don't care to be the first one. As long as I can go first, I can go back first, I can sleep first, then I'm okay. So usually the benchmark is not the one who got the full mark. Most of the time, the benchmark will be around the median. So out of 10, the median is 5. It will be in this area. Why? Because it's the basis of comparison. So we will use the following script, the following scores to compare with the benchmark, the first one. This benchmark is analogically similar to fixed reference group scoring. Okay, say for example, I administer the knowledge of knowledge acquisition of psychological assessment. So I test it on you. So for next following semester, I'm going to use your score as the benchmark. So if your junior perform better, so you will be above you. If your junior perform worse than you, they will be below you. So you are the fixed reference group scoring system. Okay, understood. Don't worry about the marking. Usually I will redo after I complete everything. I don't just depend on the first one. Otherwise, siapa yang saya tanda first tu, kesianlah dia. Kita dapat markah full. That's why, as a lecturer, I think not only me, most of lecturers here is like that. We already know that when the first person, they will be always at disadvantage. Okay, it's either kalau first person tu dia pandai, orang yang lepas tu memang teruk lah. Semua markah akan teruk. Bayangkan orang yang paling pandai tu dapat 5 je. Yang lain tu bawah 5. Or kalau orang lain yang first person tu agak kurang pandai, so yang lain semua akan dapat markah tinggi. So you kena pray yang first person tu yang orang yang kurang pandai. Okay, but usually experienced lecturers, they know this already. So we have marking scheme. So whatever your answer you write, we not compare with other students. We compare with our marking scheme. So this marking scheme is similar to criterion reference evaluation. Okay, another way for us to interpret the score of our test taker. Another way to derive meaning from a test score is to evaluate it on the basis of whether some criterion has been met. So this criterion is the standard on which a judgment or decision may be made. The criterion reference testing and assessment is a method of evaluation and a way of deriving meaning to understand the score from test score by evaluating an individual score with reference to a set standard. Other names of criteria reference is domain or content reference testing and assessment. Okay, usually we use for assessment test or achievement test. We use for educational setting. Criteria that we use right now for you is, what is the passing mark for you? 50. Oh, tinggi, yeah. I've been to one international university. The passing mark is only 40. So you are better than international. So that is the criteria. Okay, the criteria is out of 100%, 50% meaning that you have ample knowledge of the subject, which disqualify you from repeating the subject. So as long as you demonstrate the knowledge of 50% of the test, this disqualify you from repeating the subject. You don't have to repeat. Okay, and the rest are other criteria. So here you have 60% as B, 65% as B plus, 70% as A minus. Am I correct? Oh, I'm wrong. 75% is A minus. Okay. I also don't pay attention to this. Okay, so this is the criteria. Passing mark is the criteria. Another way of interpreting, we conduct depression screening. So I give you to answer a screening test on depression. For example, WHO5. WHO5. So WHO5 is depression screening developed by World Health Organization. They only have 5 items. So, but the way we calculate is different. So for each score, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they have 5 points Likert scale. So for each of these, you can answer from 1 to 5, and your answer must be multiplied by 4. So the total score that you will get the highest is how much? 5 points, 5 scale multiplied by 4. 100. Am I correct or not? So the total score is 100. So in here, according to WHO, if your score is above 60, if I'm not mistaken, is above 60, you have some symptoms of depression. So anyone who score above 60, they have to go through professional screening for mental health. So that is the guideline. Okay. So what is this 60%? This is a criteria. What criteria for? For us to understand what the score means. So this is an example of criterion reference testing and assessment. Okay, the common terminology that you will come across when you conduct tests, when you select tests, is cut-off score. They call it as cut-off score. So cut-off score is an example of criterion reference testing assessment. So the cut-off, this is the criteria. Sometimes the cut-off is the passing mark. Sometimes the cut-off is for diagnosis. Okay, so the cut-off can be in 1 numbers or can be in multiple numbers. Example of multiple cut-off score, for low score is between, for self-esteem, for example, GSE, General Self-Esteem Scale, low score 0 to 12, moderate 13 to 22, high 23 to 40. Example. Okay, so this is cut-off score, multiple cut-off score that will assist us to understand what are the meaning of our test user score. Okay, Pahero. Okay, so these are table comparisons between norm reference and criterion reference evaluation. For norm reference, we look at how an individual person performed relative to other people who took the test. We compare people to people. Okay? For criterion reference, we do not compare people to people. We compare performance of a person to a certain criteria. So this criteria could be a passing mark, or this criteria could be a basis for diagnosis. Okay, so for criterion reference test, focus on the test taker performance, what the test taker can or cannot do, what the test taker has or has not learned, whether the test taker does or does not meet specified criteria for inclusion in some group. Okay, so we compare based on certain criteria. Okay, previously I've discussed with one top manager in an institution. So this institution is going through succession planning period, meaning that the bosses is going to retire. So they are having internal discussion, not a formal discussion, informal discussion. Who is going to replace the manager, the top manager? So the answer that I received, he answered it from this perspective: norm-based and criterion-based. So for what they observe, all of the three assistants that the manager has do not qualify to be a leader. Tak bagus pun. Why? Because they compare to criteria. They don't have the characteristic as a leader. But among the three, there is one who is better than the other two. Although criteria-based is not qualified, but comparing to the three of the work, he is better. Okay? Okay, so there is an example of norm reference and criterion reference. We compare to people performance, or we compare on certain criteria. Okay. Okay, the last topic under norms or under basic assumptions in psychology is culturally informed assessment. Okay, I think we have discussed some part of this early, okay, in early discussion in the lecture. I don't remember in which lecture, but there I remember I asked you to discuss in group how your test adaptation project will address the culture considerations in psychological assessment. Again, it appears in this chapter. Okay, why? We would like to have a test, a psychological test, an inventory, a measure, a skills that are culturally informed. In other words, when they develop their test, they consider cultural differences. Okay, why? Because this is the issue. First, what we need to do to have a culturally informed assessment, we must be knowledgeable about the many alternative tests or measurement procedures that may be used to fulfill the assessment objective. Okay, what we should not do, select tests or other tools of assessment with little or no regard for the extent to which such tools are appropriate for use with a particular assessment. Okay, example. When they develop Wechsler's children's intelligence skills, WISE, you're going to learn more detail about intelligence tests in your psychological assessment too. Okay, it's more application. And if you are unlucky, you have to take with me, then we have to go to the lab lah. If you are lucky, then you will take with my wife. So my wife is much more lenient than me. Okay, so if for intelligence skills, when they want to develop, the objective is to investigate intellectual ability of a person. Okay, so what they use is paper and pencil test. But what they don't realize is not all children for all parts of the world familiar with paper and pencil test. Okay, even you right now, you are not familiar with paper and pencil, although many people are writing right now, because you are generations that are more familiar with laptops, gadgets, tabs, and etc. So you write faster using this gadget as compared to you write it hands-on. Okay, so if the level of exposure to paper and pencil is different, what more is for children? So they notice that when they conduct Wechsler Children Intelligence Skills for American white children, they perform better as compared to migrant children. So when they went to Africa and they noticed that children in Africa have more or less similar intellectual ability. More or less, dia pun pandai. They have similar intellectual ability. They can have creativity. They show a lot of characteristics of intelligent children, but they play with different tools. So how they adapt? So they devise an alternative intelligence skills using clay. And they notice that when they use clay, dulu masa saya budak-budak dia panggil plasticine. Masih main dia plasticine. Dekat sebelah, have you been to our children clinic? Children clinic, we have play therapy. Okay. I don't know whether you're going to learn that in abnormal psychology or clinical psychology class. During my time, you don't even have the lab. But if you have the opportunity, you go. And you can ask, I think abnormal psychology, Madam Aini is teaching that. My lecture report is very good. Clinical psychology, like Madam Aini, Dr. Inara, Dr. Usman, or Dr. Jamila. You can ask, what do clinical psychology observe during play therapy? Because different way of children playing can indicate different learning disability. Okay, so sometimes we thought it's the same thing. Okay, coming back. So when Wechsler test developer noticed that actually African children have more or less similar intellectual capacity and intellectual ability, but they demonstrate it differently. So they start to devise an intellectual test, intelligence test using clay. Instead of asking them to answer paper and pencil, it asks them to do some forms of playing using the dough, the clay. And the result indicate that intelligence more or less similar between African children and American white children. So, but here, different methods of assessment indicates different levels. Why different levels? Because of cultural influence. So the best test is the test that is culturally informed, meaning that whether I'm coming from Kedah, you coming from Sabah, Sarawak, you are from Perak, from Kuala Lumpur, there is no influence of our background on our intellectual ability. Okay, we are talking about intellectual test. If we are talking about attitude, personality, this background should not have an effect. Okay, this is interesting. Last 2 weeks, I have written a paper, a meta-analysis paper, about the effects of leadership on unethical pro-organizational behavior. There are people like you who are high performers, but you will go above and beyond, sometimes beyond ethical boundaries, okay, to perform, not for yourself, but for the betterment of the ummah, for the university, for example, for your company. Okay, so that is unethical pro-organizational behavior. Okay, say for example, I have the issue as well. You have working hours between 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. but you come here at 5 a.m. in the morning and you go back at 9 p.m. in the afternoon. Okay, you also suffer, but you do it because of your organization. So add an example of unethical, but it's pro-organizational behavior. Okay, so what I found is in meta-analysis, most of research conducted leadership effect on unethical pro-organizational behavior is around our region. There are noticeable countries that reported this research. China is the most, followed by Vietnam, USA, and one in Thailand. So there are almost like 48 studies for the past 10 years. No other countries conducted the same research. So I was wondering why leadership, all of you going to be leaders, or you are already leaders, why leadership promote unethical pro-organizational behavior? We're not talking about normal unethical behavior where people lie, people steal, or people manipulate, or people take bribes. This is unethical behavior. You suffer for the sake of your company. Okay, I start to look at different types of leadership. So we even have unethical leadership. We have transformative leadership. We have authoritarian leadership. And I found that regardless of different types of leadership, so if you have unethical leaders, so by right, you will demonstrate unethical behavior. But even ethical leaders, such as responsible leaders, and one of the interesting findings, self-sacrificial leaders, pemimpin yang selalu berkorban, also promote unethical pro-organizational behavior. I was in a way touched because I found quite a number of I regard leaders who sacrifice themselves. And when I read through and I do my meta-analysis, I found that unethical, self-sacrificial leaders, they create sense of debtness. You have to, in fact, terhutang budi, thank you. You put the words in my mouth. Okay, dia rasa terhutang budi and they will go beyond boundaries just to return the favor. Okay, now I feel like as a leader, you should not be you should not sacrifice yourself. Because of what? You are promoting unethical behavior. This that may lead, which I do not find in my study, this may lead to burnout and issues of work-life balance for your employees, okay, not for you. Okay, so here, why at the first place this type of research conducted in this region, not in other countries, not in Europe. There are 2 studies in Arab, one in Iran, one in Saudi, but the rest are not. So if we want to conduct the same study, say for example in Europe, in UK, we have to go back and re-evaluate the survey that they are using, re-evaluate the inventory, the test, the scale that they were using. Because of why? There is high possibility is culturally loaded. Okay, culturally loaded is the opposite of culturally informed test, meaning that your item, the questions in our test are influenced by certain cultural elements. It could be from China, it could be from Malaysia, it could be from Saudi, and etc. Okay, so we have to do some form of test adaptation. Okay. Second, what we should do if we want to make sure our test is culturally informed, we must be aware of equivalence issues across culture, including equivalence of language use and the construct measured. Okay, remember in your test adaptation, in your panel review form, the first part, we ask our panel whether our construct is equally understood in our context as compared to the original context. Secondly, whether there are or there is any cultural or language differences that may hinder the understanding of the participants. I give you an example. How many of you are involved in society or association? Like Star, Mahala, you. What are the characteristics of good leaders, in your opinion? Okay. One, time management. How about the way these leaders deal with others or deal with tasks? Maksud dia, how good leader in your eyes treat tasks or activity that he or she responsible to do. Very efficient. Efficient task performance. Okay, it could be task oriented. This is a more familiar word that you come across. It could be people oriented. Okay, let's focus on this too. Which one is for you is a good leader? Task oriented or people oriented? People oriented. Anyone here is task oriented? I already know your answer from empirical paper. Okay, as a leader, you have to perform two roles: your task role and your social role. You call social role what we understand as people oriented, who care about your well-being. How do you doing? Are you okay? You're not. Have you come across Dr. Pam? People oriented. Okay, they care about your well-being more than your task. Okay, they prioritize that. Another type is task-oriented. A good leader, from theoretical perspective, is both. Is both. But in cross-cultural IO psychology, we found that there are cultural differences in terms of how people regard good leaders. If you conduct this study, good leaders characteristic in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in United States, in UK, but not in Ukraine or Hungary. The UK here refers to England, Germany, Europe. They would consider task-oriented as a good leader, meaning that they don't care about your well-being. They don't care about your emotion, about your feelings. What they care is our organization, our company must achieve the KPI, must perform. Okay, either you sick, your family have problems, your sibling got issues, your cat has toothache, they don't care. Okay, but that is not the interpretation of the leaders. That is the interpretation of the followers. Okay, employees yang nak bos yang macam tu. Cakap Melayu pula aku. As compared to in this region, Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, China, Taiwan, Japan. Japan now, not Japan previously. Japan now. They prefer people-oriented, whereby people, leaders who care for their followers, although their company is underperformed. As compared to India, Dubai, who want both. So saying what? Saying that although we are looking at this at the same criteria of good leadership, both of this task-oriented and people-oriented, but if you conduct the study in United States, in England, people will say this is a good leader. If we conduct it here, people will say that this is a good leader. Okay, but if you conduct it in India, they said both is a good leader. Okay, so it shows that our culture, our upbringing, our location does influence our understanding of good leaders' characteristics. Okay, so here we must be aware of equivalence. So in this case, the concept of leadership is not equal across places. In Malaysia, we understand good leaders differently. Okay, in the United States, they understand good leaders differently. Okay. If we want to have a culturally informed assessment, we should not simply assume that a test that has been translated into another language is automatically equivalent in every way to the original, in every way of the original. Okay, that's why you have to do your test adaptation project. Why? Translating the item, okay, from English to Malay, from English to Urdu, from English to Arabic, for example, is not enough. It's not adaptation. That is only translation. So we cannot assume translation is enough. So if we want to have a culturally informed test, we must do the score, interpretation, and assessment data in its cultural context with due consideration of cultural hypothesis as possible explanation for findings. In other words, when you use tests that have been developed in other countries, say regardless it's from Eastern part or Western part or in Europe, you must have these in your mind. In other words, you might have different results. And these different results could be because of our differences in culture. Okay? And we should not do the scoring, interpretation, and analysis assessment in a cultural vacuum. In other words, all we treat it as the same thing. Okay, we must have that in mind. Okay. Sudah habis. New achievement. 248. Tak nampak. Ini pun tak nampak. Ini kot. Okay. So in a nutshell, in this lecture, we come across for 1 month. It's very long. So we have studied the first one, 7 assumptions of psychological testing and assessment. And then we look at the characteristic of a good test, okay, from logical perspective and from psychometric soundness. And we look at other considerations, which is with the last one is contain adequate norms or normative data. And the last 2 lectures, we discussed about norms. What is norms, sampling for norms, type of norms, and we look at just now the reference group scoring systems and the criterion evaluation system. Okay, lastly, we look at the cultural influence. Okay, I don't plan to discuss any further because this is where the topics that cover for your midterm. Okay, any questions? Okay, because I give example in terms of test, so they don't depend on marking scheme. Okay, you have to divert a little bit from educational test. Okay, say for example, we develop aggression scale. Okay, so this scale will tell us how much a level of testosterone, how much levels of provocation needed to trigger us. Okay, so say for example, we have 1 to 20 with 5-point Likert scale. So here we can have 5, here we can have 5 for all. So when we test, okay, you will get in, say for example, these 20 people, the score range from 70 to 75. Okay, but this is the normal score for you. Okay, so this is not an achievement test. This is a right or wrong answer. This is attitudinal. Okay, attitudinal. So for the next time, so I'm going to conduct the same aggression levels in Indonesia, for example. So how do I know that their aggression level is normal? Yes, I compare with fixed reference group. Okay, so say for example, this score lower, or I can say that, oh, they are less aggressive. So less aggressive, how I know they are less aggressive? Because I compare with your original score. So now you become a reference group. Okay, but if I do understand, if say for example, if we talk about educational test, they are right or wrong answer. So kalau tak ada marking scheme, macam mana kita nak tahu jawapan tu betul ataupun salah? So what are the criteria to evaluate? So marking scheme is criterion. But here, if it's personality based, attitudinal based, interest, motivation, so we don't have any measurements or criteria to understand. So we can compare with other groups. Okay? Okay, any other questions? Okay. Currently, I am reviewing integral anxiety, your group. Okay, integral anxiety panel review. There are some corrections. So I'm going to email you on the correction, and then you can proceed with the approaching the panel. But I do understand the next 2 days you're not going to sleep. You're going to study about psychology assessment. So I'm not going to ask you to do it before Wednesday. But please make sure you do the correction before Monday next week. Okay. You must submit to me on Sunday because of why? Monday morning I have class with master students. So I can ask 2 of my master students to answer your panel review form, act as your panel reviewer. So like I mentioned before, each group you must find 1 reviewer. Okay, but the other reviewer, I will ask my master students and if possible, my PhD students. But my PhD students, out of 5, only 1 is Malaysian. So only 1 is qualified to be your panel reviewer. Okay, but now I have to do hybrid class. I don't know whether they will come or not. Because one of my students from India has to go back because of visa issues. So all of class is going to be hybrid. So it's meant hybrid for postgraduate. They have the options whether to join face-to-face or to join online. Okay, so at least I think you will get 2 other panel review from my master student. Okay, so I'm going to return back your review with comments. So please do the correction, make the correction, and then email them back to me by Sunday. Okay, so for the next 2 days, you can focus on your midterm. Okay, who is joining? Apika Adi. Okay. If there is no question, so that's all for today.